Her name was Ava Sinclair, 32, a school teacher. Soft-spoken, sharp-witted, and the kind of woman who didn't raise her voice unless it was to protect her students. That Sunday, she wasn't in a classroom. She was standing in the checkout line at Garver's Market, a small-town grocery store with tired tiles and older white faces. Ava was the only black woman in the store that day. She was used to stares, not used to violence. She had just paid for her groceries, eggs, oatmeal, a box of cereal, nothing dramatic, when it happened. The officer's name was Deputy Rick Halvers. He was off duty but still in uniform. Not a coincidence. Rick liked being seen. He wore the badge like a crown, not a responsibility. He stood 2 people behind Ava in line. She hadn't even noticed him until she heard him mutter something behind her. People like her always take their time, don't they? Ava turned slightly, confused. Excuse me? His eyes narrowed. You heard me. The cashier froze, the whole store did, but no one said anything. Ava stepped forward, calm but firm. If you have a problem, maybe speak to the manager. Not me. Rick smiled, the kind of smile that always comes before something mean. And then he slapped her. Right there in front of cameras, people, God. His hand came down with sudden rage. Her head jerked sideways. The sound of palm on skin echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Ava didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, stunned, blinking back tears, blood rising beneath her cheek. Someone gasped. Another person pulled out a phone. And then the officer said the thing that told everyone exactly who he was. That's what happens when you don't show respect. It should have ended like so many stories do in places like Brookline County. Another black woman assaulted. No charges, no justice. A silent community, a crooked report, and a system that shrugs. But Ava wasn't just a teacher. She was something more dangerous to men like Rick Halvers. She was connected. That night, the video hit Twitter. By morning, it had 4.3 million views. By afternoon, the mayor's office was flooded with calls. But the real turning point came when Judge Lila Hartman, a retired black federal judge, and Ava's former law professor, saw the footage. She called Ava directly. Her voice was steel. I'm coming to town, and I'm bringing a few friends. By Wednesday, Brookline County wasn't quiet anymore. National news vans were parked outside the courthouse. Civil rights attorneys from the Equal Justice Initiative and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund flew in overnight. The grocery store's camera footage was subpoenaed. The phones of every witness collected. Ava, silent through it all, gave just one statement. He put his hands on me because he thought no one would care. Deputy Rick Halvers was suspended, but not arrested, until they found what he'd tried to hide. An internal file buried in HR, 3 previous complaints of excessive force, all from black residents, all dismissed quietly. One from a 16-year-old boy who said Rick had shoved his face into gravel after a jaywalking stop. Another from a woman who said he'd called her a loud animal during a traffic stop. A pattern, a history, a blueprint of hate wearing a badge. On Friday, Judge Hartman stood with Ava at a press conference. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She simply said, "We are done burying pain in the name of peace. That time is over." Then Ava spoke, her voice still quiet but shaking now, not with fear but power. I've taught children to use their words, not their fists. To solve problems with minds, not violence. I did everything right, and I was still assaulted by the man sworn to protect me. If it happened to me, it's happened to others. So I'm standing now. Not just for me, for all of us. The pressure worked. The DA filed assault charges within 48 hours. But that wasn't enough. The civil rights attorneys launched a civil suit against the sheriff's department, alleging systemic negligence, racism, and cover-ups. And while the town's white leaders scrambled to save face, the community began to rise, black, brown, and even white citizens who had stayed quiet too long. Local pastors opened their pulpits. A Latina nurse came forward, said Rick Halvers had once threatened to arrest her for talking back. A retired Army veteran, white conservative, stood at Ava's side during a rally and said, "Wrong is wrong, and that man doesn't deserve to wear our country's uniform." 3 weeks later, Rick Halvers was fired. 2 months later, he was convicted of assault and sentenced to 18 months in prison. It was rare, unheard of even. But the story didn't end with his arrest. It ended when Ava returned to her classroom, her cheek healed, her voice steady. The kids greeted her with flowers. One little girl, brown skin, afro puffs, raised her hand and asked, "Miss Sinclair, are you a superhero?" Ava smiled. "No, sweetie, I'm just a teacher." But across the room, another teacher stood watching, a white woman named Sarah, who had never spoken up before. She looked different now, sharper, braver, and she whispered under her breath, "She might be a superhero after all." Ava's story wasn't just about a slap. It was about what happens when power meets resistance, when silence becomes solidarity, when the system is forced to look itself in the mirror and can't look away. They tried to humiliate her. Instead, they elevated her. Because behind Ava stood allies with influence, with platform, with voice. And when they spoke, the system listened. One woman, one slap, one storm, and justice, for once, didn't run. It turned and stood with her.